Well, the battle for Canada continues with election 2025, and the future direction of our country is on the line. So joining me in studio to chat about our federal election is Tanner Hnidey. He is an economic analyst from Lloydminster. He's a political commentator and public speaker. Tanner, welcome. Great to have you as our first studio guest since COVID.
My pleasure. Thank you for having
the
me.
inaugural one here. So great to have you with us today. Now, Tanner, the main focus so far in this campaign seems to be the tariff war and who can best stand up to Trump. So is this a long-term thing that we need to be worried about, or is it perhaps being used as a fear tactic to gain political advantage? What do you think?
That's a good question. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think the main thing that Canadians ought to be concerned about is the Canadian federal government using the tariff war or the tariffs to justify all of these policies which I think are damaging for Canada. So my concern is the Canadian government using the American government to justify these policies which make no economic sense whatsoever. So I have no doubt, and we all know that the government right now is using the tariffs to justify very radical moves, or will indeed do so in the future if they're allowed to engage in that sort of action. So that's my ultimate concern.
Yeah, so you're against reciprocal tariffs?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That doesn't help Canada. It harms Canada, and we're very foolish to try and engage in a trade war with America. That isn't something that we ought to do. No, instead, I think we ought to the best of our abilities, open up trade in the markets and demonstrate how free trade is beneficial to both countries and enables the flourishing of both countries to increase, not decrease, rather than what we are trying to engage with the American administration right now.
Yeah, your opinion's not much different than a lot of the people that we've been interviewing.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Now, Tanner, the polls continue to show a Liberal Party lead, but the Conservatives are narrowing that gap. So how much weight should we be putting in the polls?
Well, that's a good question too. To be entirely honest, I put all the weight on Jesus Christ. I don't put much weight into polls precisely because it's man's wisdom. I don't think it's Christ's wisdom. And so it might be that right now it says that Carney is winning or is going to win the election and Poilievre is going to lose, but I'm confident that the Lord will have his way. And maybe that does mean that Carney wins, perhaps. Maybe Poilievre wins. I don't know. What I do know is that, Almighty is sovereign and his will be carried out. So how much weight to put into polls? I would say not as much weight as I put into Jesus Christ.
Okay, yeah, and polls can be so deceiving
They can.
too. Maybe they're basing it on 1,500 people.
Of course. Oh, of course. It's
right.
so difficult to do statistics. Absolutely.
Yeah. So certainly affordability, another major issue in this election, along with the housing market. And then it looks like both Carney and Poilievre are promising these GST cuts on new homes, but I'm guessing it'll take more than that to fix things.
Yeah.
So as an economic analyst, what do you think needs to be done to make housing more affordable?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Far more needs to be done than just cutting GST. We've had these low interest rates in Canada for how many years? They were artificially low, right? They were set to be so very low, as to then entice individuals who otherwise wouldn't be able to purchase a home to purchase a home. To be entirely honest, they didn't have the capital that was required to do so, but they were told by these low interest rates to buy right now. Now is the time to buy. It's cheap. And then when the lockdowns came and people were, working from home, that demand only increased. More and more people wanted a nice home to live because that's where they were working. And so with that increase, that spike in demand brought on by low interest rates and the lockdowns, you saw this massive jump in prices. Because of course, every builder knew there was money to be made right now. And along with this massive immigration that the country has, people need places to live. Lots of people need places to live. The demand continued to rise, and with that, an increase in the price of homes. So what do you do to stop the problem? Well, first, I'm convinced you have to cut immigration. I think it has to be zero, to be entirely honest, because you have to slow the demand, right? The first thing you do when the bathtub is overflowing is turn off the tap, right? You don't wait to do that, you do that first. And then you have to allow interest rates to move as they want to move. It's wrong to artificially restrict them so that they're so very low, giving these buyers a false impression of what the market is actually like. So there are multiple steps that need to be taken simply to introduce common sense into the interest rate markets and just the market in general, again, to try and stop the housing crisis.
Yeah, It's crazy. Now, here's an interesting one here. So, Tanner, one of the strange things about this election is to see that seniors who typically lean towards the Conservatives are supporting the Liberals these days. Well, the young people have now switched to leaning Conservative. What do you think is the driver behind that?
Well, I think with regards to the seniors, I think many seniors are concerned about change. You know, they've lived as they've lived for many, many years. And what Mr. Poilievre is proposing and Mr. Bernier and so on too, are the change is radically different compared to what the Liberals have introduced and implemented in Canada over the last 10 years. And so I think there is a real fear among seniors that if there's this massive change, this large shift, that, you know, their way of life will be disrupted seriously. But on the flip side, the younger generation, we can't afford homes. We can't afford to, you know, work only one job. We can't afford to have children and so on. And we're realizing that the economic situation is so much worse than what has been told to us by so many individuals. And so you can only deny reality for so long. You know, it's no wonder young individuals want to change. This way of life that they've been promised is not coming to pass. And so they're, you know, they want to try and make something different to increase their chances of having this life which we, you know, which we desire.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the economy needs a major boost, doesn't it? And the Canadian public is now asking for coast-to-coast pipelines to be built. And it looks like Mark Carney has noticed this and is now promising to speed up major natural resource project approvals. But earlier in the campaign, he went on record stating that he will not repeal Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill, as it's known, right? So what do you make of this, Tanner?
Oh, that no pipelines will be built under Mr. Carney. You know, Bill C-69 is so damaging for the energy markets. It allows so much regulatory uncertainty into the markets that investors who want to build big energy projects in Canada really have no desire to do so, because there's no guarantee that after they've built their project, the federal government won't shut down that project. And therefore that investor might lose billions and billions of dollars. And so you have all of this hold up right now in Canada's economic markets. And unless you repeal bills like C-69 and C-48, that hold up won't go away. It won't be reduced. And so I think Mr. Carney's talk is just that. It's all talk.
Interesting. Okay, so Tanner, there's a lot of chatter in Western Canada with regard to the possibility of Alberta and perhaps even Saskatchewan separating, especially if Carney wins. So what are you hearing? Is this just talk or is it serious?
No, I'm hearing the same. There is a lot of talk about this, about the movement for independence and separation. I think it is serious. I think Albertans and the West at large, for that matter, is tired of the way that they've been treated over the last not just 1 or 2 or 5 years, but decades on decades on decades. And we're realizing that we've realized that what Ottawa is trying to pursue right now will completely transform our way of life into something that we do not want it to be. So yes, that momentum for independence right now is roaring. And I think should Mr. Carney be elected on the 28th, it's only going to explode.
Wow, interesting to see what will happen there. So Pierre Poilievre continues to make tough on crime an election issue. And he's made some announcements. So he's promising this 3 strikes and you're out legislation, which would see criminals found guilty of 3 serious offenses facing a minimum prison term of 10 years. And they could be designated as dangerous criminals, or dangerous offenders rather. So some are arguing this is much too harsh. So what do you think about
They're
this?
wrong. It's not much too harsh. I think we live in a country right now that has been far too soft on crime for a very long time. Sometimes it seems like the only way to avoid jail in this country is to actually commit a crime. So I'm very much in favor of strengthening our justice system compared to what it is right now.
What kind of character traits should Canadian voters be looking for in a prime minister?
Well, right now I'm looking for a prime minister who's righteous. I want a man who will follow the law and do what is right according to the scripture. That's what I want first and foremost. And I want a man or a woman who has an air of statesmanship and doesn't engage in this new progressive Marxist nonsense, and instead wants to see the Canadian flourish and see the Canadian family flourish. That's what I'm looking for in a prime minister, and in the government at large, for that matter.
You've mentioned faith being very important. Obviously, that's what you're looking for in a leader as well. So what would you then say to Christians watching who may be hesitant to get involved in the election?
You must be involved. You know, there's an old quote that says, you know, you might not want to be involved in politics, but politics will be involved in you. We have the great privilege of being able to be involved in our government and in our in our political process that so many people around the world do not have. And I think it a shame and a disgrace to not be involved in that process, considering the privilege has been given to us. And if we are not active in the political process, then I think we deserve everything which is coming to us. If we have an opportunity to ensure that we can maintain or increase our rights and freedoms, then we have an obligation to do so.
Okay. So, Tanner, what's your prediction as to the outcome of this election then? Who will win and by what margin?
That's a very good question. Like Chesterton, you know, I prefer to prophesy after the event already occurs. So I might say my prediction is, well, as I said at the start, the Lord will have his way. You know, I really don't know how the election's going to turn out, but I'm confident that the Lord will have what he desires in this election. We're right now living in this stunning age, you know, that is unprecedented in Canadian history, with the rise in independence, or at least the momentum for independence, with the younger generation transforming the political arena, or at least trying to, and becoming more and more involved. And I'm very encouraged to see all that's happening in the country. I'm very encouraged to see just how many people are starting to realize and have realized that perhaps Canada's government isn't all that they say they've cracked up to be. You know, so much of what's been told to us is coming out to be deception, and we're looking at how we can be involved to make our lives better, and how we can champion the family and champion that structure which has been neglected for so many years. So I'm very encouraged. I'm very excited about the future, and I have full confidence that yes, if we work as hard as we can, and if we do what's been commanded to us, then the outcome will be very positive for us as a people.
It's really different times right now, and this feels like such a different election. Do you think that the outcome will be higher in terms of voter turnout?
Oh, yes, I would imagine so. I would think so, especially with how Mr. Poilievre has galvanized so many Conservatives to his rallies. I think the Liberal side and the NDP side and so on of the political aisle recognize that and see that, and I think it will galvanize them too to head to the polls and vote for Mr. Carney or whoever they choose. So yes, I would expect a high voter turnout. If it wasn't high, that would surprise me.
Yeah, and you mentioned Poilievre there, and it's interesting to see that rally that he had in Edmonton the other day, the number of people that came out when Edmonton, I know provincially Edmonton's a very NDP town, right?
Yes.
So did that surprise you to see that number of Conservatives, I guess?
Well, yeah, I don't know that it would surprise me. I mean, it was an incredible number, no doubt. But you know, Alberta's going to vote. I mean, you never want to predict the future that you don't know. But of course, we expect Alberta to vote Conservative. So to see that number of individuals coming to Mr. Poilievre's rally in Alberta, in Nisku and Nisku Leduc area, I think again just shows how people are looking for a change, and they want to support someone who they believe will help rescue them from this last decade of Liberal rule.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Tanner.
My pleasure.
Really appreciated having you in as our first in-studio
guest
since COVID.
How exciting. Thank you for having me.
Times are changing. Tanner Hnidey is an economic analyst and political commentator and public speaker.